The only thing really anybody is talking about currently is the health and the future of Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, who suffered his second really severe concussion on national television. You go back to 2022 against the Cincinnati Bengals, 4 days after he was alleged to have his first concussion of the season against the Buffalo Bills. He got thrown to the turf, and then that is when we get kind of introduced to the fencing mechanism, which in the way that I kind of understand it is that is the way that your brain is kind of letting your body know that, you just suffered a severe brain injury. And I think that image of Tua laying on the field and having those fencing mechanisms is really going to be the determining factor if he does continue his playing career or not. I mean, a lot of players in the NFL suffer concussions really every single week. The difference is maybe they take a little bit of a hit, then they go to the blue medical tent, they get examined, and then it's determined, hey, they have a concussion, but you don't really see the visual of them actually knocked out on the field, not having control of their body. And for Tua, this is the second time now that he's done this on national television with millions of people watching. I think that is what makes this such a horrific scene for Tua, the Miami Dolphins, and the NFL as a whole. Because really in like the last decade or so, the NFL has been really trying to pivot away from the concussions, from the CTE, from all those issues that have arisen from players like back in the day that have had some mental issues or even potentially taken their life because of some of the brain trauma that they've gotten from football. So they're really trying to make an effort. And we've seen with the rule changes, we've seen with the Guardian caps, we've seen it with the new helmets, and just all sorts of things that they put into the game, them just trying to make sure that they can limit these head injuries, limit CTE. And now when there's a player, and specifically a quarterback who's one of the highest paid players in the league, and now it's twice within 2 years of him having a bad concussion in front of millions of people, that image and that visual of Tua lying on the ground, doing that fencing mechanism, I think is really going to scare the NFL and may end up really forcing their hand to really make sure that Tua never plays another snap in the NFL. Personally, if I am a family member of Tua, I do not want him to play another down either. I mean, he just had 2 kids. I think they're both under like the age of 2. He just got married as well. I mean, he has a new family now, and he really needs to think about his long-term health, what it's going to be like when he's 40, 50 years old, if he's still going to be able to be there 100%, if he's going to be able to meet his kids and those sort of things that happen later in life. He really has to take that into consideration. And I know that he just signed a new contract and he may not be able to get all of the money that he signed for, but I still think the Miami Dolphins and the NFL will do right by him and at least give him $50+ million, or even his signing bonus, which I think was around $70 million. I think he'll be at least able to take that away with him and combine that with his rookie contract that's well over $100 million that he's earned in the NFL. That doesn't take into consideration all the sponsorships he has. I know he has a Gatorade sponsorship. I've seen him do some muscle milk ads. So I think Tua will be fine financially. I think he already has generational wealth. I don't really think that's a huge issue for him. And then we've already seen all of these previous players go into media, have some good lucrative careers in there as well. So I just don't think money is a huge selling point on why Tua should continue to play. He said back in 2022 that he really considered retirement. His mom was really pushing for him to retire. And I just can't imagine that now that his family is not going to be pushing him even harder to retire now after once again having such a severe head injury on national television. And even if you're the Miami Dolphins or the NFL, how can you even feel comfortable putting him out there that he's not going to suffer one of these head injuries again, be knocked out on the field again, or even something worse than that? I mean, how can you feel confident in that not happening? I mean, we've seen it twice now, 2 separate occasions. He went through all this training with jiu-jitsu. He lost some weight to make sure he can move around better. He learned how to slide a little bit, and still the instincts were not there in the game. He was the one that brought the contact to Damar Hamlin. He had the first down marker, chose not to slide. And I don't even think that hit was really out of the ordinary of what we see in the NFL. I feel like running backs and wide receivers take that hit 20+ times a game. I really don't think that was a really violent hit. And I think it just shows you how kind of fragile his head injuries are at this point. And I think that might be the most concerning element of this entire situation is it's like if he does come back, it's kind of like a ticking time bomb for this to happen again, because we've seen now these hits that he's taking are not like Ray Lewis in the early 2000s just blowing somebody up across the middle of the field. I mean, he's really just running into a player and his head hits his chest plate and then that's knocking him out cold. I mean, that's just not a very good sign for somebody's brain health. I do think Tua should have the final say on if he does want to continue playing or not. I mean, it is his career, it is his body, it is his health. But in that same breath, I really do believe that somebody in his family, somebody in the NFL, or somebody even in the Miami Dolphins needs you to say, you know what, man, It's not worth it. Just sit this out, retire, and just be done with it. I feel like somebody needs to save him from himself at this point if he does not want to hang it up. And personally, my prediction about the whole thing is I think that's ultimately what's going to happen, because I mentioned the brand of the NFL and then really not wanting this concussion thing to really overshadow the entire brand of the sport. And to take that point a step further, Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, was at the game last night. He witnessed Tua having that concussion and all those symptoms live in person. I think there's a great possibility that the NFL tells the Dolphins Tua is sitting out the rest of this season. He's not going to play another snap this season. And then once we get to the offseason, we're going to deal with it if he can't even come back the following year. The NFL has too much to lose in terms of just lawsuits from former players, current players, even to be held liable for Tua if he does suffer even more concerning injury than just maybe a concussion. I mean, what happens if one of these times he can't get up and he has to use a wheelchair for the rest of his life, or he can't really remember anything? I know that might sound a little bit crazy, but I really don't think that's out of the realm of possibility when you keep having these severe concussions. I've seen some people say maybe he should come back with like the Guardian cap on because the NFL just made that legal to wear, but even then, I don't really know how much that's actually going to help prevent concussions for him. It's really just to help with smaller collisions like in the trenches. It was really meant for offensive linemen and defensive linemen that when they have that initial contact with one another, their helmets are not just hitting each other. It's really just adding another layer of protection. All of Tua's concussions have come from him banging the back of his head on the turf. And I really don't see how the Guardian cap, which is really meant for just head-on collisions, is going to prevent that for him. And again, I'm just trying to hammer this point home. If you're a Tua who you've done all this jiu-jitsu training to learn how to fall, learn how to protect yourself, you've lost weight so you can be a little bit more mobile to avoid hits as well. You even changed your helmet after the 2022 season that gave you even more protection. If you're going to come back again, use the Guardian cap and still try and play through this, it's like, at what point is enough? And I just feel like Tua kind of needs to realize that it's really just not worth it at this point. And it feels like everybody in the media, former players, former coaches, even current players and coaches, are kind of just saying, Tua, just retire, man. As I'm recording this video, Antonio Pierce, the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, was asked about the situation, and he just said, I've never seen something like this happen to the same player 3 different times. There's more to life than football. Just take care of yourself and hang it up. And I feel like over the weekend and press conferences after the games on Sunday and even Monday, coaches and players are going to be asked about the Tua situation, and they're all relatively going to say the same thing, because I feel like at this point, it's a pretty obvious decision that Tua and his family need to make. And as for the Miami Dolphins as a franchise, they are in absolute shambles. And I know there's been a lot of people over the course of the last like 2 or 3 years that have asked me, what team am I a fan of? And I'm sad to say, I am a fan of the Miami Dolphins. And this offseason, I made around 2 or 3 videos talking about the direction of this team and how I was not super optimistic heading into this season and what I would have done with Tua, making him play out his 5th-year option and really going from there. But obviously the team didn't do that, and I think now we kind of realize that was a pretty big mistake. And honestly, the Dolphins are in such a hard spot because they just extended Tua, they just extended Jalen Ramsey, they just extended Tyreek Hill as well. Mike McDaniel just got a contract extension. They basically went all in on this regime and core, and it was pretty clear, I think even last year and the past couple of years, that this team does not have what it takes to really get over the hump and compete with the true elite teams in the NFL. I thought all the big moves that they made this offseason from their GM Chris Greer was just pure incompetence, and he's been with the team for over 20 years now. He's got to go. He has to go. He can no longer be the GM of this team. He's just made so many huge mistakes time and time again. And I think just how we managed this offseason is really the last straw. There was no rational person out there that believed signing Tua, who was a huge injury risk, who only stayed healthy for 1 season out of 7 years dating back to Alabama, who was clearly a limited player athletically with his arm talent against good teams in the cold. Nobody thought it was a good idea to pay him all of that guaranteed money, but he did it anyway. And we saw in week number 2 of this season, it only took 2 weeks to really realize how big of a mistake that was, because 1, we saw Tua suffer again, maybe a career-changing concussion, and then 2, he still was not performing well against an elite, really good team on primetime. That's been one of the biggest criticisms regarding Tua so far. He threw 3 interceptions, and I know there's been some Dolphin fans on Twitter kind of arguing about the semantics of them, but who really cares? At the end of the day, he was not playing well, and once again, it was another instance of him coming up short in prime time against a good team. So I think if you're the Miami Dolphins, even if Tua does come back this season at some point or even next season, let's just say he takes a long time off, comes back with a guardian cap, he does more training, regardless if he retires or not, the Miami Dolphins cannot go into the 2025 season with Tua being their only real asset at the quarterback position. That cannot happen anymore. And I know he just got that huge extension that's still going to be on the books if he chooses to not retire, but you have to spend a first-round pick or a second-round pick on another quarterback, because we've seen now with Tua, he is such an injury risk. One hit and it's over just like that. And so I think they need to make sure they invest some capital in a real backup quarterback they can groom as their next quarterback, because I don't think anybody would bet on Tua being able to play for like the next 5 years. I just do not think that is a realistic scenario. Truly a doomsday scenario for the Miami Dolphins franchise last night on Thursday Night Football, but prayers up to Tua. I do hope he can recover from this, get back to 100%, and then make the best decision for himself and his family. But that is my take on the situation. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think about Tua and what do you think he should do with his career, and also just any other comments you have regarding this pretty horrific situation. But subscribe to the channel if you are new, drop a like on the video if you did enjoy it, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in my next one.